And the thing is that I come back to that moment all the time because that is the moment that changed my life. Because every day I have moments where I'm like, I don't see how this is good yet, God.
Yeah.
I don't see it. There's so many times in my life where I'm like, got blinders on, and I'm like, I don't see it yet. I don't see how the next, I can't see the next chapter. All I can see is what's right in front of me right now.
Mhm.
And I know because I know what happens next. Now I know that there is another chapter. And I know that God can make really beautiful things out of something that seems really bad in the moment.
Welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe, where we pour positive back into your day, sharing stories from real people who have made it through some real struggles, but were able to restore their health, hope, and peace. I'm Lisa Roers, your host, and as a certified coach, I'm here to guide you to be your best self-advocate, to help you restore your health, ignite your faith, and conquer those fears while you navigate your own healing journey so you can eventually exchange your dis-ease for durability. If you're looking for hope and encouragement to live a life you love, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe. I'm real excited to have with us today a ray of sunshine herself. Karaleigh Garrison is with us from Utah, and I just want to welcome you to the show, Karaleigh. Thanks for being
Well,
here.
thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Karaleigh has so many different things that she's done. I don't know exactly. You're like the Energizer Bunny that just has never-ending energy. And for those who can't see the podcast here, if you're not watching, if you're just listening, Karaleigh just lights up a room. She just has such a light and a joy about her. And we're going to hear a little bit about where she gets some of that joy today and some of the ways that she's pushed past some tough things in her life and ways that she can inspire you to potentially do the same thing. So Karaleigh, again, welcome to the program. And maybe you can just introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about all the things you're doing. Maybe just start with a couple of the crazy things that have gotten you to where you are now.
Yeah, so my life has definitely been a roller coaster ride. I am a speaker, a singer-songwriter. I call myself a podcast coach because I have two podcasts and I love podcasting. Podcasting changed my whole life. And so now I teach moms how to podcast from their cell phones because I so firmly believe in women sharing their voices and the community that comes from podcasting and how powerful it is to share your story and the gift that comes from saying it out loud and how that can just transform the way that you say your story and the way that you understand how your life has played out. There's so much power in all of that. So my story really kind of started when I was 18 and I went off to college and I met and married my husband in 7 weeks when I was 18 and a half.
Oh my goodness, 7
Um,
weeks?
7 weeks.
It
It
reminds me
was
of
one
the
of the
movie of Frozen. Like, you can't fall
yeah.
in love with someone you just
Mhm.
met, but you
Yeah,
did.
my parents were definitely of that, like, "No, what are you doing?" mindset, but I went to BYU, so that was a very, BYU thing to do, and so we went on, and then within 5 years of our marriage, he became disabled. We had our first only 18 months into our marriage, and now all 3 of our kids have been diagnosed with autism and, among other special needs, and my husband's been disabled for a decade, and it's been a journey. We've moved from 3 different states. Well, I guess 4, but 1 we came back to Utah. We met and married in Utah, and then we went to California and Texas, and we're back here in Utah, and it's been a journey of disability and healing and miracles and figuring out who we are along the way and amazingness.
Oh my goodness, you said that, Karaleigh, so fast that I think our audience may have even missed it.
So, yeah, it's a whole if I went into every detail, we would be here for many, many hours.
Many hours, yeah, I
So I
understand.
will suffice it to say and sum up with where we are now. And
Okay.
where we are now is that we've been married for 15 years. We have 3 kids that are 13, we're at birthday season though, so we're about to jump all the ages, right? So my oldest is 13 going on 14. My second is 12 and my youngest is 9. And my oldest is a girl. Her name is Aurora, and she has high functioning autism and
Okay.
really struggles with executive functioning type things. And then my second is Joshua, and he's 12, and he's severely autistic, semi-verbal, and type 1 diabetic. And then my youngest is 9, and his name is Benjamin, and he is also has high functioning autism.
Okay. Oh my goodness.
And they were all diagnosed at different points in their lives, and several of them were diagnosed at multiple different points. So that's a whole journey in and of
Yeah.
itself.
So there's more than one diagnosis that you're also trying to navigate with those kiddos.
Yes,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, so
And
there's
then,
so many stories wrapped up in all of those things.
well, I'm sure even any just one of those stories could
Yeah,
be, is a serious challenge as a mom. You just want your kids to live and be strong and healthy. And when
yeah,
you get you get that news that things are going a little sideways, it does kind of,
yeah.
it creates a different, whole different journey of healing and health.
It does, and at the same time, it's also a relief because when you spend a lot of time going, "Something's really
Oh,
wrong. Help me
yes.
understand, doctor, what's going on here because something's not quite right. This is my child's really difficult. This does not make sense. Something's going on." And then they're finally going, "Here's a label, here's a diagnosis, here's a reason for the
Yeah.
thing that's hard."
Yes.
It's kind of like, "Oh,
So it's
there's
not
a
just that I'm a
word
bad
for it."
teacher. So I'm not a bad mom. There's more going
Yeah.
on here. Got it.
And the same thing's true, like, with my husband and he has a whole slew of diagnoses, and he was, unable to work for a decade, and he has had his struggles, and I can tell you that we've gone from him it wasn't like a specific event that caused him to be disabled. It was a genetic chromosomal defect that over time, he got worse and worse and worse. But it led to him collapsing every time he got overstressed, and we'd have multiple, episodes a week where I'd be carrying him to bed, and he would not be able to function for hours or days. So we went from that kind of scenario where he couldn't vacuum, he couldn't do the dishes, he couldn't watch the kids for sure because of the possibility of him collapsing, right? To now he's had this really kind of miraculous healing transformation. He's been at his job for like 18 months. He
Yeah.
jogs for fun. Sometimes he used to walk on a cane. He was 30 years old walking on a cane all the time because he could barely walk. And now he jogs for fun and does yoga and
Oh
does
my
all these things.
goodness.
And yeah, we've
You
come
have,
really far.
yeah, it sounds like it. Do you have some sense for, some environmental change or diet change or anything that
Yeah,
you guys did?
I have a big story around this if you want to hear it.
I do want
That
to hear
it
it. Yes.
it kind of changed our whole lives, actually.
Well, then we definitely want to hear it.
So it starts in 2018, which was kind of the pinnacle of my husband's disability, where he was just at his worst. He was collapsing
Mm.
multiple times a week. He has a whole slew of diagnoses, like I said, PTSD, depression, anxiety, all of those things kind of go hand in hand with any sort of physical disability, just naturally.
Mhm.
But many other things. He actually has a spinal stimulator implanted in his spine for chronic pain. He has insomnia. I mean, all sorts of things. But he was collapsing all the time and really, really struggling both physically and emotionally in 2018. And we had all three of our kids. Our youngest would have been 4. So they were 4, 7, and 8 at the time. And we had this really strong prompting, this really strong just feeling that we lived in Texas near his parents, just down the street, and they were watching our kids all the time because we'd be in and out of the hospital with my husband constantly. He actually had been admitted every month for a whole year for something different. Like he had really terrible asthma and they almost intubated him like it was a whole thing. Like something terribly would go wrong all the time. And we really relied heavily on their support. But we had this really strong feeling that we needed to move back to Utah to finish our degrees at BYU because we had left without finishing. our
Mm.
bachelor's degrees, both of us had. But we're going, "That's crazy." I don't that's crazy. Like, "Thanks, God, but, pass on that one. We
Yeah,
have
yeah.
no support up there. We How are we supposed to leave all the doctors, all the therapies, all the schools, all the family support? Like, we have no income. We have no like, we should move 3 states away. That's
Wow.
crazy. No, thanks." And then my husband finally got approved for SSI, which we'd been applying for, like, 3 years, and they then what they do is they kinda automatically deny you.
Okay,
And we
so
finally got
tell our listeners what
approved.
SSI is.
It is disability for people who are disabled, and you have to have doctors prove it, and you have to there's a whole lot of paperwork that goes into it, especially for I mean, for kids as well, but for adults, it's a really drawn out process of proving that you're actually unable to work, that you actually have something physically wrong with you. So he got approved for financial government assistance for his disability,
Okay.
which included back pay,
Wow.
which I will tell you that, like, the month-to-month actual payments is extremely small, but the back pay was like, "Oh my gosh.
What a gift.
Oh, God just made it possible for us to make this move to Utah. Oh, maybe we actually need to follow this really, really deep prompting that we'd been feeling for a year of, like, we are supposed to go finish our degrees."
Yeah. Yeah. The resources were just made available to you.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was I was praying really hard about this because I'd been feeling it really strongly for a long time, and I'm going, "Okay, I know we're supposed to go. You don't have to tell me anymore. I know it." And I was praying, and I was like, "Okay, like, I get it. We're supposed to go, but are we gonna be okay? Like, are we gonna survive this?"
Yeah, because your
I
husband's
actually
been in and
got
out of the hospital, right? Because you weren't so
Yeah.
he wasn't even really considered stable yet.
No.
Okay.
And I got this really clear answer, and I'd never gotten, like, an answer in words before. It was only, like, feelings, right? I got, like, a crystal clear answer that it's not just gonna be okay, it's gonna be amazing. And so we did. We took this huge leap of faith, and we moved from Texas to Utah, and we had to start all over with all the therapies and with all of the schools, which is such a nightmare when you have special needs kids that they won't take at regular schools. And all I mean, all so many doctors, all the specialists, all of the things.
Oh, you had to create your whole new team again, the team of
Yep,
teachers, the team of doctors, all of that.
yep, all the therapies, and yeah, it was definitely a struggle to get all of that established again. We got on wait lists for a year for the same therapies that my kids had been in before, and we did it. We had lots of struggles getting housing, and we just trusted, and we got into our new situation, and Joshua was 7, and he was completely and utterly nonverbal. Didn't have a single sound that meant anything, and he'd been in speech therapy for most of his life and hadn't made any progress at all. And at this time, we're going, "Well, never gonna talk." I call it my Facebook meltdown of 2018.
Mm.
We had just moved, and I got on Facebook and just, like, sobbed, and I was like, "I give up. I give up on Josh ever talking. I can't keep hoping and praying. I can't keep listening to my 4-year-old pray for his brother to have a voice
Mm. Oh my goodness.
because it's tearing my heart out. And if God doesn't want him to talk, then I guess it's time I accept that because I can't keep hoping for that.
Mm.
I can't keep hoping that my son's going to say, "Mom," or "I love you." I can't.
Infinite.
So I had this moment of giving up. And it's interesting to look back on that moment and be like, "Oh, I was turning it over to God." Even though it felt like an "I give up," it was really a surrender,
Yeah.
and how
Yes.
beautiful, like, that surrendering moment was. And now you have to consider that, like, we had 3 kids at 3 different schools, and my husband were both full-time college students, which was, like, completely insane.
Yeah.
But then we had this moment that, like, I will never ever forget, like, it's etched into my mind, where Joshua woke up. It was the first Saturday of October. We had just moved. We got there in, like, August, and he came out of his bedroom, and he looked completely different. He looked like he had lost a whole bunch of weight. overnight. He was
Wow.
so sick. And he liked to, like, not wear anything except for his pull-ups, so you could see his thigh gap, you could see all of his ribs, and he was 7, and he was just gaunt, like, he was so skinny, and I was horrified, and I'm looking at myself going, "Have I been so absent with this move and with being in college full time that I just didn't notice until right now, like, how bad he looks?" And I took a picture of him, and I sent it to his school teacher, and I was like, "Did he look like this yesterday?" And she's going, "No. What happened? He looks like he lost 20 pounds overnight."
Goodness.
And he walked into the living room and he curled up on the floor in a ball, and it was like, "What's happening here?" Because Joshua, you have to understand, was my very wild child. This is the kid who would bounce off the walls every moment of the day without his medication, and his medication only helped a little bit. But this was the kid we had a lock on the front door because he would bolt out the front door, and he had
Mm.
actually opened our neighbor's car while they were backing out of their driveway. This is my kid who we'd pull into a parking lot at the grocery store, and he'd be out of his seatbelt and out the front door before I could unbuckle my seatbelt. Like, I was
Oh,
constantly on edge to keep this kid safe because he was a never-ending danger to himself. Like, he was obsessed with opening other people's cars. He had wrecked our truck like, he had never ending, like, on running around all the time. So the fact that he walked slowly out of his bedroom and then laid on the floor in the living room for 3 days was like, "What is happening?"
sure.
And part of my
Definitely out of
brain
character, right?
yes, part of my brain was like, "Oh my gosh, he's dying. What's happening right now? Like, it's the end of the world." And part of my brain was like, "Calm down. He's just sick. He'll be alright. Kids get sick. Like, it's just sick." And my 2 halves of my brain were battling it out, and I let that logical side win, and I just let him curl up in a ball for 3 days on the floor or whatever, and by Monday, he was still like that. He wasn't perking up at all, and I was like, Nope, something's wrong. It's time to take him in." So I took him to the pediatrician, and he was so weak that I had to carry him into her office because he couldn't walk on his own because he was so weak, and I was like, "This is not a normal stomach bug. This is not a normal kid illness." And he laid on the floor of her office, and she wouldn't even look at it. She was like, he's just got a stomach bug. He's gonna come right back to being normal in a couple days." She wouldn't even do anything, and I was like, this is not my first go around. I've got 3 kids, done this before.
Yeah.
She did nothing, and she was like, "I guess we could take his blood, but he has autism, and getting blood from a kid with autism is really hard, so let's not." Like, she was like, "I guess you could bring him back in a few days if he's still like this, but he's gonna just come back and, like, he's gonna bounce right back in a few days." So she sent us home with nothing.
Wow.
And a couple days later, my husband and I were switching back and forth who was missing all their classes in college to stay home
Mhm.
with the sick kid. So a couple days later, I was in my classes and my husband was home. And he texted me a picture of Joshua. And he looked drastically worse.
Hmm.
Like his skin was turning gray and his eyes were sunken in. And I took one look at that picture and I was like, "No, no, nope, I'm done." And I left in the middle of my class, and I took that kid to the ER, and they took one look at him, and they knew exactly what it was. And they were like, "We need to get blood from this kid right now." And I'll tell you what, this kid who I had to carry in from the car to the ER because he was still too weak to walk on his own. It took a team of 5 grown men to get 1 drop of blood from his finger because he fought like a saber-toothed tiger to get
Wow.
blood from his
Oh
finger.
my goodness.
But all it took was 1 drop of blood, and it confirmed that he was in diabetic ketoacidosis, and he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Wow.
And they sent us off to another hospital, and he was admitted for the next, like, 3 days, and it was kind of my worst nightmare, like, this kid's gonna be admitted to a hospital, and we got there, and I was like, "You guys don't understand what this kid is capable of."
With the locks
He's
on
gonna
the doors.
change he's going to change the language on all your computers to Japanese. He's going to burn this place to the ground. Like, and like every time they had to get new blood, which was like every 30 minutes, they didn't have a whole team of grown men that time. He would just pull chunks of my hair out. Like it was insane all night, the whole night. They had a nurse just sit at the door just for me so that I could sleep because I was so worried that he was just going to wake up and go bolting down the stairs just for the hospital. They were really amazing.
Mm.
And then the next day, they had me go to parent training where I got to learn all about how I would have to watch every single bite of food he eats for the rest of his entire life and then dose him with insulin for every bite of food that he eats. And, like how many grams of carbs are in that handful of Cheerios he just ate.
Wow.
Nobody knows. And I was released from parent training and I got to go shower and I had this moment where I got to have it out with God. Where I was like, hello, God. I don't know what part of okay or amazing this fits into in your plan, but it doesn't really fit in my idea of okay or amazing.
Yeah. Like
Like,
I'm
I
with
don't,
you because you said it was going to be amazing and this is scary and this is not good. What's going on?
I don't see it.
Yes.
And the thing is that I come back to that moment all the time because that is the moment that changed my life. Because every day I have moments where I'm like, I don't see how this is good yet, God.
Yeah.
I don't see it. There's so many times in my life where I'm like, got blinders on, and I'm like, I don't see it yet. I don't see how the next, I can't see the next chapter. All I can see is what's right in front of me right now.
Mhm.
And I know because I know what happens next in Joshua's story. Now I know that there is another chapter. And I know that God can make really beautiful things out of something that seems really bad in the moment.
Wow.
And so we got discharged from the hospital on Friday. And we went home and I will tell you that like the beautiful insights that I'm going to tell you like months if not years and years.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't just here handed it to you. No,
Yeah,
not
it
quite.
was survival mode for a really long time. Like, there was no thinking. There was no like, oh, this is beautiful. No, it was just like, how do I get to the next moment? But Joshua went to school Monday and he pooped in the potty for the first time in his entire life. We'd been trying to potty train him forever. He was 7 and he pooped in the potty for the first time in his life. And it was like, what is happening? And I was like, oh, maybe it's because he was finally eating. We had spent years and years and years trying to get him to eat, but he wouldn't eat anything. We'd actually put him on prescription medication to try to get to increase his appetite, to get him to eat, but he wouldn't eat. But as soon as he was diagnosed with diabetes and he got insulin in his system and his body was getting what it needed, he
Yes.
started eating. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't like, oh, he's going to eat broccoli and asparagus now. No.
Yeah.
He was eating corn dogs and only corn dogs. So much ketchup you wouldn't believe. That was the only thing he would eat. He was eating like 9 corn dogs a day. But he was finally eating enough food to go to the bathroom. And then within a month, he could say all of his colors.
Wow.
And we'd had years and years and years of therapy, and he was not even mimicking. Like, he couldn't even mimic sounds. And as soon as he was diagnosed, his speech skyrocketed. And within a year, I was begging him to shut up. He would not start talking. And to this day, I mean, we're like 5 years out now. He talks at me. He yells at me and talks at me. He will tell you, shut up when he means I love you. And he will tell you, I love you when he wants you to get off the phone call. Has favorite words that are inappropriate. And it's amazing because I prayed so long for him to be able to say whatever he wanted. And now he gets to say whatever he wants. And it's not always the things I wish he would say.
Well, you didn't pray for him to say things that you wanted. You prayed for him to say the things that he wanted.
Right. And it's so funny how, like, there's a thing I love to say. It's, there's blessings in every trial and trials in every blessing. So I can remember every day what a gift it is that he is able to talk and how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
But what's more from this story is what it taught us and how it changed our lives. So I've been a singer my whole life, and when I first met and married my husband in 2008, like, I had wanted to get in the School of Music at BYU, and I auditioned for the opera program, and I didn't get in, and I was so upset, and then I got married and had kids and kind of moved on. But then in 2018, when I went back to BYU, I was like, "This is it. This is my chance. I'm gonna get to audition for the School of Music again and live my dream. Yay!" And then, we moved back, and we had the diabetes thing, and it was so hard, and I was like, "Okay, not letting it deter me," and I auditioned for the School of Music, and I was like, "This is finally my turn. Like, this is the reason for all the hard things that have happened over the last 10 years, like,
Thing that God is promising me. This is it.
this is it. This is
Yeah.
my thing." So I auditioned for the School of Music, and I got through the first round, and I got through the second round, and my voice teacher was telling me that because she was in the program, she's going, "They just loved you, like, you were so great, like, they told me, like." And then we found out in February that I was not accepted. And they only let, like, 3 or 4 people in, and they actually emailed me, and they were like, "Please don't. Please don't stop. Please go audition for this school and this school and this school, like, you should really pursue this." And it was one of those moments, one of those blinders on moments where I was like, "This is the end of the world." I was telling myself, like, "This means that God doesn't want me to sing." Like, this is like, it was very much one of those moments of, like, I was just totally devastated. I couldn't see any good in it at all. I was like, "I'm never gonna sing again." I couldn't sing at church without sobbing. It was really bad. And I was simultaneously watching Joshua have a new word every day.
Mm.
And, like, it started slowly, really slowly, really, really slowly. And I started having these realizations eventually. Things like, "Oh, I only pursued opera because of that one thing that one kid said to me when I was a teenager about being too fat to be singing my own music. I like being the diva and singing the high notes, but I don't like listening to opera. I didn't actually really like opera that much. I only studied opera because I thought it was the only stage I could be successful on."
Mm.
Oh, yeah. And then wait a minute. I actually started studying, costume design instead, so I was in the background watching everyone else get to be like, I was designing the costumes for all the other people to be for all the leads, and I was like, "I wanna be the lead." And then I had this realization of, like, "Wait a minute, if I was the lead, which is what I always wanted, some director would be telling me everything I got to sing, every step to take, every way to sing, everything. I don't want that. That wouldn't be the dream to be controlled in every aspect of my performance. Like, wait a minute, I wanna choose what I wear. I wanna choose what I say. I wanna choose what I sing. Hold on. And wait a minute, if I got this thing that I've been dreaming of for a decade, I I'd have to be gone at rehearsals and at performances, like,
Fun for your
every
family.
night. Like, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to be home with my kids, like, that's the dream. I didn't want all this so that I could leave my family. I wanna have my family too, like, I want
Isn't that
both.
interesting how many times what we think we want and what we think we must have is
Yeah.
really not the thing that we should have?
Yeah, and I started going, "Wait a minute. Maybe if the way that Joshua was able to speak, it looked completely different than I planned." Like, I was like, "Joshua plus therapy equals Joshua speaks." That's not how it worked at all.
Yeah.
We had to have a little bit of God in the middle there,
Yeah, a lot of God.
then
Yeah.
a whole lot, and then I was like, "Maybe my journey to music can't just look like Karaleigh plus." the School of Music equals Karaleigh gets to sing, maybe it's gonna have to look a little different. Maybe it doesn't have to look the way that I thought it did. Maybe there's another plan. Maybe I need to trust God a little bit more on this one
Yeah.
too,
And
and
maybe
let
that
it
plan is the amazing plan that God has for me. Maybe my myopic look that with the blinders on isn't
Mhm,
actually seeing the panoramic beauty that God has for me.
and that's a fabulous word, myopic. Yeah, and so I pivoted and I took a songwriting class, and I hadn't written my own song since middle school. Wow. And someone told me that I was fat and I couldn't write my own music, and it was immediate where I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is home. This is where I belonged all
My
along."
light. This is what lights me up and makes me happy.
Yes, and it was I'd spent so many years waiting for somebody else to give me permission to sing on their
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah.
And instead, I learned how to give myself permission or get my permission from God that, like, I can just sing. And I learned how to produce my own music and how to just do it myself instead of waiting for some high up person to tell me I was good enough.
Yeah.
And so I wrote and produced my own album
Good for you.
at the same time that I was creating my podcast, Seeking Sunshine, and my, single from the album, which the album's called Seeking Sunshine, and the single's called Seeking Sunshine, and the podcast is called Seeking Sunshine. And that was kind of how it all started was like, "Oh, I get to do this." And now I have a studio in my basement in my house, and I get to write music at home with my kids, and I actually write custom podcast intro songs for people, but I get to do it, like, from home. I get to
On
do it with my
on
kids
your
and
terms.
podcasting yeah, on my terms, and it's like I get to do I've always wanted to be a speaker, and I was like, "Oh, that's impossible because I don't get to be on stages because that would mean being away from my kids," and it's like, "Oh, hey, it turns out there's a stage in my basement. Stage right here on my computer
Yeah.
called my podcast. There's an actual way that I get to be all of me and still be all of me as a mom.
Exactly.
Like, I get to be
Yeah.
the best of all the parts of me and not have to give up on some of me, and, like, God knew that that was an option before I ever did and led me right to that.
Yeah. It's like God has you ever seen those corn mazes that are out in the big old fields, you know? And there's always a lookout tower somewhere where people can kinda see how you're doing, you know? God's on the lookout tower. He can see exactly where we are in the maze, but we're looking down this one maze tunnel, and we're like, "No, it's a dead end. There's no place for me to go." And then you don't realize until you get to the end there, like, "Oh, there's a turn, and this turn takes me to" like,
And it feels like going backwards, but it's actually progress.
totally. I think we so often forget that we don't have the whole picture. And and that's what I think the beautiful thing about having a relationship with God and Jesus is because you've got somebody who does have the whole picture and the whole maintenance manual, the whole owner's manual, everything about our bodies and our life is, there's somebody who has a plan. And
Yeah.
in some respects,
Good.
it's really freeing, like you said, to just surrender it all and say, okay, I'm going to stop trying to fix this.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be beautiful. It might not be the beautiful that I drummed up, but it could be the most amazing beautiful that I could never have imagined. Yeah.
Trusting is so essential.
And it's hard for us. We're since beginning of life, we're raised to be independent and strong and do it on your own and figure it out. And it's hard to reconcile that with surrendering to a God that has more for us. But
Yeah, absolutely.
well, I want to pause and go back to a little bit because there's so many things about your story that make me I have so many questions because you and what's your husband's name again?
His name's Jacob. Well, and
Jacob.
actually, I wanna add on that, like, he went as that whole story went on,
Yeah.
he went from not being able to walk, walking on a cane, struggling with collapsing all the time, as he went back to college and struggled to walk across campus and trusted in God that he was supposed to go back to college and supposed to struggle through that. He grew in strength as he tried every day to get from class to class to class. We had this whole thing where he was on pain management and he was on all these opioids. He was actually on 12 different medications, manage
Wow.
all of the different things that he had, and he got cut off one day from his pain management, and it was this huge blow, and we thought it was the end of the world, and he switched to medical cannabis, and it changed his whole life, and he was able to get off walking on his cane. He actually got off all 12 medications, and his life is completely different.
Wow.
Like,
Oh,
physically, it's night and day difference.
oh my goodness. And do you feel like maybe some of the 12 medicines he was on were in some respect
Yeah.
propelling his issues?
There's definitely, negative side effects to a lot of prescription medications, and yeah.
Okay, so he was experiencing a lot of the side effects that of those drugs. Okay.
Yeah, and what's more is that Utah so Texas is very humid. Texas has a lot of rapidly changing, weather conditions and is very humid. He hasn't had a single asthma incident
Mm.
since moving to Utah. Like, he used to have chronic bronchitis where every 2 months he would be in the hospital dying of bronchitis,
Oh my
and since we moved here, not a single incident with his bronchitis and his
Wow.
asthma, and, like, he had EpiPens for his bronchitis and for his asthma that was a common thing that, like, he'd have to be seen for, and he hasn't because Utah's really dry,
Yeah. For
difference in
instance,
the weather, which that was not something we ever could have predicted or like we never considered that like the weather would have made such a difference and like how much in his healing did it make a difference that his body wasn't fighting off that constant infection. Like,
exactly. Well, there's so many things that are in the air. I'll tell you that when if we ever go down to Florida to just vacation, my face, 4 days, my face breaks out like something fierce. I mean, it turns into this red, horrible, itchy, burning
I'm
face
so
rash.
sorry.
I have no idea what it is. It's something in the air, flora, fauna, something that's circling in the air. And with the heavy, thick humidity of that space, that stuff sticks into the air more so because it's a heavy, thick, humid air.
Yeah.
So I can see that how moving to Utah with a cleaner, lighter, less humid air could really free up. Maybe he was fighting
Yeah.
some other allergies you didn't even know about. But yes,
Yeah, and like Texas has really bad pollen in the air
okay.
as well.
Oh my goodness. So you've got Jacob's doing better and you've got Joshua's doing better. So those guys how about the other two? How are they progressing?
I would say that they are progressing. They're just progress with age. Benjamin, yeah, they're just progressing. Um,
Okay.
my other 2 are very high functioning, so I don't tend to talk about them as much.
Got it. I see. I understand completely. Well, the question I was going to bring up is I thought, with all of this stuff going on in classes and you've got the hospital things and recreating relationships with doctors and teachers and schools. And I'm amazed that it didn't take a toll, or maybe it did, on your marriage.
Actually, our marriage has been better than ever in the
Oh,
last 5 years. Yeah, our marriage has been better than ever. I'd say at the beginning, it was really rough where we didn't really know each other very well, and we fought a lot, but we both have parents that are remained married their whole marriages. They're still
yeah.
married to this
Yeah.
day, that just kinda fought their way through it,
Yeah.
for better or worse, and so that was the example that we had, and so it was like, you kinda just stick it out and keep going, and we've had a lot of times where it was close.
Yeah.
Where it was we were, considering what our options were. And it always just came down to it's a better choice to stay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a really key word that you used because I think so often, especially when you've got so many things going on, so many variables that you never signed up for, right? Because when you got married, none of these variables were on the
Yeah,
plate.
yeah. Mhm.
So when you have all those variables that you never understood were in the mix, it is a choice.
Yeah.
I am choosing to stick with this. I
Well,
could
and
leave,
it
I could give up on it, but no, I'm going to choose to stay.
yeah, and one thing that's really helped me is my favorite quote, which comes from Frozen, actually,
Okay.
which is People make bad choices when they're mad or scared or stressed.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, like, somebody's yelling at you because they are overtired, because
Mhm.
they literally did not sleep all night, like,
Yeah.
they said something snarky or mean or awful,
Mm.
and then you're like, "Oh, they must not have slept."
Yeah,
Like,
give them the
and you
benefit of the doubt. It has nothing to do with you. It was with that.
it literally does it, and then you're like, "Wait a minute, when I don't have any sleep, I'm pretty cranky too."
Right.
Like,
Oh my
you
god.
can relate so much better and you can forgive so much easier because you're like, "I know what that's like."
Yeah.
I know that when I've been screamed at all day by Joshua that, like, I shut down or I get really overstimulated or I struggle to be calm and patient, like, I know how I get when I'm
Mhm.
mad or scared or stressed,
Yeah.
so I can be more forgiving when I'm aware that other people are not their best selves because they're mad or scared or stressed. And then
Exactly.
I love that quote because it's really easy to teach this concept to kids as
So
well.
true. Yep. It's so true. I know exactly the song you're taking that from.
Yeah.
I can hear it in my head now. But
Yes.
I often say to myself too, like hurting people hurt other people. And
Yeah.
so it's just that I love what you had said because it's just we have to give people the benefit of the doubt that when they're reacting to us, even if it's something hurtful, really hurtful, that there's got to be something else going on. When I'm at a store or when I get really bad service at a restaurant or something, I'm like, okay, you know what? This is not about me. Something's going on in that person's life. And if I really have my wits about me, I will stop at least in my own head and I'll pray for that person because obviously they need some prayer given for
Yeah.
whatever else is going on in their life. But it's not always easy to do that. And when you've got a marriage that has a lot of stresses going on and you're being yelled at all day by a high stressed kid, it can be really overwhelming and you can end up saying things that you really regret.
Yeah. One thing that's really true is that when you're in an intimate relationship and you have a 10-15 year history, they know more about you. So
Right.
there's more fodder to come from. So when they are really, really overtired, really overstressed, they have more to pick from when it comes
Yep.
cannon fodder. Like
More
they've got they
ammunition.
yeah, because they know you more intimately.
Yeah.
If they're really angry and they wanna hurt you, they've got more to hurt you with. It can still not be about you even when they chose to poke you in just the right spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Oh my goodness. I totally get that.
It can
Well,
and the really the truth is that somebody who is really whole, somebody who is feeling completely loved, completely whole, completely they're well rested, they've eaten, they're completely whole and like everything's perfect, they're not gonna find anything wrong with you.
yeah.
They're gonna love you perfectly no matter what you did.
Yeah.
Even if you screwed up, they will be the first to forgive you and tell you how amazing you are. So if
Mhm.
somebody is finding fault with you, that's your first indication that they're not totally whole.
Yeah. It's a really good word. That's so true. Well, you have found ways, and I love you said a couple things actually on your website that I think are so I don't know, just wise. Good wisdom comes from, the struggles that God puts in our life, the struggles and the fights that we go through in our journeys always make us stronger, always make us more resilient. And you talk about cultivating courage, and I think you've certainly done that through not necessarily you didn't necessarily choose it, but through it, you've cultivated courage. And you also mentioned about momentum and kind of striving for momentum when things even when things are messy. So I'm curious if someone else who's listening right now is really struggling in that place where you were in that really dark space of struggling and trying to find the courage, what maybe wisdom or tips would you give them?
Mm, it's another Frozen quote, taking the next right step. It's when you're living in survival mode and you're completely like, "My brain's not functioning."
Mm-hmm.
I'll give this example. The other night so Joshua, now that he talks all the time, he literally kind of yells at me all day long.
Oh no. Okay.
And it's demands. He doesn't he still has apraxia of speech, childhood apraxia of speech. So he doesn't so much, like, understand communication styles, he just
Yeah.
demands things of me all day long, and he doesn't understand, like, "Okay, well, it's not kinda happening yet, you have to, like, wait a little while." He'll just demand it of me, so, things that can't happen yet, things that are like, "No, I'm not going to the store this very moment." So he'll just keep yelling it at me.
Okay.
So, after hours of that, like, my brain can't take it anymore, and I'll start, like, shutting down, and so it was, like, a Saturday, and we'd done this all day, and then my husband got home from work, and I had gotten so, like, to this point of, like, my brain had just shut down. Like, it was like, I could not think,
Yeah.
and my husband was like, "Just go take a walk." And usually I'm like, "No, no, no, let me take care of everybody, let me do all the things," and I was so far gone that I literally couldn't argue with him because I got out the front door and I was like, "What's a walk?" Like, I got to the end of my driveway and I was like, "I don't know what to do next. What is a walk?" My brain had stopped functioning. There was lightning, and I just, like, started going towards the lightning. Like, I was just, like, drawn, like, it was we did end up with a storm, but luckily it wasn't quite raining yet. So I just, like, was drawn towards the lightning, and I made it around the block, and by the time I got around the block, I could think again, and I was like, "Oh, let me explain what happened." Like, my brain started working as I just kept, like, being drawn towards the lightning and got further and further away and had more clear space. My
Mhm.
brain came back online, and,
Sure.
like, that's when you're at the very, very worst, so far that, like, you literally can't think and you cannot function. Literally, God will guide you.
Yeah.
Like, your body will be drawn towards the next right step. It might be taking a nap.
Yeah.
It might be taking a bath. It might be moving one foot in front of the other and taking a walk
Mhm.
at night in a lightning storm.
Mhm. Yeah. And that we sometimes do need the change of environment. I think actually what you did in getting what your husband kinda gently, lovingly
Yeah,
nudged you out of the house.
yeah,
You need to change your body and change the environment and get yourself into a different, healthier space. And just stepping out of your house and going for a walk sometimes is the best thing you can do to just separate you physically from whatever environment you were in and give
yeah,
yourself a little fresh air to let your mind clear. And like you said,
yeah.
come back online. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mental clarity,
Yeah. Yeah.
giving yourself
Awesome.
space.
Wow, you are such a beautiful example, Carolee, of tenacity and grit and the beauty of surrendering and the power that comes after that and trusting in the midst of some messy uncertainties. What a really beautiful inspiration that all is to see just keep pressing on, keep making that right next step and God will reveal the path eventually, even though it doesn't always happen in the timeline that we'd like it to.
I'll at least tell you the next right step.
Exactly. The next right step. I love that. Oh my goodness. How can
Good.
people find you? What's the best way for them to find your course or to find information out about you? How do
So
they find you?
everything's on my website. It's kind of the catch-all place for everything. On Instagram, I'm Karaleigh.Garrison and Facebook, Karaleigh Garrison, but the website, KaraleigHgarrison.com is kind of where everything is at.
Perfect. I'll make sure we put those in the show notes then so folks can find you and maybe connect. Thank you, Carolee, so much for being on the program today. It's just a pleasure to hear your story and a joy to just see the light that emits from you and just to hear and be inspired from your story. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Carolee's story is such an encouraging story of strength and power and grit and resilience. I have 8 great takeaways for you today. Number 1, your story has power. Take time to pause and consider all the ways that God has been faithful in your life. How has He been there, guiding you, protecting you, providing for you, and strengthening you? And then remember the multiplying effect that comes from sharing your story, so others can be encouraged and reminded also of God's sovereignty, His plan, and His unfailing faithfulness. Number 2, life sometimes requires a leap of faith. For Carolee and her husband, it was the leap of faith to move to a different state when all the logical factors seemed to be telling them to stay put. But her faith to trust that prompting which God had put in her gut was exactly the move they needed to make to find healing and a path that was not only good, but even more amazing than they could have anticipated. Faith is like that. It's not of this world, and it rarely makes sense. Faith requires us to lean into God, and that can be said of a physical move, a big decision, and certainly just the choice to believe in Jesus in the first place. We can all see more and more clearly that this world is a mix of two forces, the spiritual force and the physical forces. Leaning into our faith and trusting the gut feel or the prompting that God puts in our hearts will most definitely not make sense sometimes, at least not in the moment. But we just need to pray through it. And with confirmation that follows those prayers, those gut feelings can let our faith guide us to only what God can see. Sometimes it'll be a huge leap, but if you prayed about it, listened, and have confidence that that decision is the right one, then, my friend, go for it and go with God. Number 3, surrendering to God might feel like giving up, but in reality, you are giving it over. Handing over things that we can't figure out when we just don't have the strength to keep on wrestling it to the ground or press on through those unknowns. Well, giving up to God is our best move. He wants to help us. It's kind of like the parent who patiently waits alongside that struggling child who's trying to open a bottle or figure out a puzzle. We, as parents, we wait and we wait for them. We wait for them to ask us for help. If they can figure it out on their own, well, then they're more strong, they're more confident, and more equipped for the next puzzle. But if they can't, we're right there next to them, waiting for them to ask us to intervene. I think God is a lot like that, waiting for us to loosen our grip and ask Him to show us the way. Number 4, we see the now, but God sees the eternal. I think we can all agree with Karaleigh. We all have moments where we just can't make sense of the circumstances. We can't see good. Nothing makes sense in that tragedy and the pain and the struggle and all the things that we're dealing with, the unknowns. We are in the maze, my friends. Part of the point of the maze is to learn and to grow and to get stronger and more refined, to work through those trials. But we also must remember to look up once in a while. And when it gets really hard, remember that God is right there, waiting to guide us through the maze, away from the dead ends, out of the thorny bushes, and into those beautiful open spaces. God can create beauty out of something which seems really difficult in the moment if we reach out to Him. Number 5, what we think we want and what we really need are rarely the same thing. You might really want that chocolate cupcake, but what you might really need is some good, clean protein. We want things that satisfy us now, but God knows the whole story, and He knows what we need both in the short term and the long run. We, frankly, are really bad at choosing things which have a delayed gratification. So take inventory of your wants and your needs. Surrender your desires to God and let Him guide you for the best way to use your talents, your resources, those desires, and your gifts. Number 6, side effects of prescription drugs can actually become the illness. In some cases, prescription drugs can be a complete and total godsend, helping our bodies bridge the gap from sickness to health. But there is a point where that cocktail of prescription drugs can be so toxic, creating so many other side effects that it's nearly initiating a whole new illness. Remember Karaleigh's husband who was on 12 prescriptions at the same time, which was creating so many side effects that he was unable to walk. Once he got off those prescriptions, he got a lot better. So in those cases when you must use prescriptions, use them wisely, use them sparingly, and if possible, not in conjunction with any other medications. And most importantly, try to only use them temporarily. Don't become reliant on a long-term medication if you don't need to. Try to find out what your body might need in order to become medication independent. Number 7, weather matters. If you are having chronic issues that have no explanation, remember, every region of the United States, and of the world for that matter, has different plants, pollen, bugs, trees, and air quality. So consider these elements when you're trying to sleuth out your health improvements. An extended stay in another area of the country might reveal some amazing improvements for your health and well-being. And number 8, I can hardly say this one without hearing that song in my head from the movie Frozen, but people do make bad choices when they're mad or scared or stressed. So if you and your spouse are navigating a difficult time in your family with the kids, maybe a job transition or a financial challenge, or even a really difficult health concern, if you find yourself with more yelling going on or fighting happening than usual, pause for a minute and try to remember to give each other the benefit of the doubt. Consider whether the basic needs of your loved one are being met. Most of the time, those fights have nothing to do with anything personal. They can get personal, but they didn't start from something personal. Instead, they're driven from a lack of sleep, a lack of patience and peace, or just an overwhelming sense of frustration from the circumstances. Stay the course, my friend. Respond to anger with peace, and look for what's happening behind the fight. What's going on to cause the fight in the first place versus the content of the words in that current battle. Choose to love, choose peace, choose to believe in the very best of your spouse, and give them the benefit of the doubt. Hey, thanks for listening. Right now, please share this episode with 2 of your friends or family members and help spread the encouragement to others around you. And you can also watch this podcast on YouTube. Finally, if you have any tips or ideas you'd like me to cover, please feel free to send an email to my production team. Send an email to podcast@lisaroers.com. Thanks again for listening or watching today, and we'll see you right back here next week at the Sunshine Cafe. God bless you and have a great week.